Hello and welcome to another episode of Mercurial Gems. I'm Jen.
I'm Vi.
And today we are continuing on our Pluto series. This is our final Pluto sign within the zodiac. We will have officially actually touched every single Pluto sign. This one was probably the hardest, and we now arrive at the very end, which is Pluto Pisces. And as always in this series, we have an intro video. If you are new to this and you have not watched any of our other videos on this series, I highly recommend our intro video. But just to give a few little points, Pluto in astrology, the reason we're calling it the generational series is because Pluto takes a long time to move. So it lumps us into a bigger group of people all kind of embodying at least an undertone of the same energy. And so we are actually seeing so many correlations with the generational themes of each Pluto placement and what they went through and experienced. And then just as it moved through the sign, we're seeing history really show the extremes of the sign that it finds itself in. So this has been such a fun deep dive for us, and Pisces is just continuing on. I will say that within this, we really talk about the evolutionary astrology points that you always want to look at the opposite sign. So for Pluto Pisces, its mirror is Pluto Virgo, and that will be its kind of like energy to balance out some of the extremes that come with the sign. And Pluto is always about power and control extremes, and you really can see the undertone of that through history and through personal story. This is one of the Pluto placements we actually can't get like any personal story on, which for my Gemini made this one kind of the least fun, to be honest. But we did do a deep dive in history. We actually like looked back to the dates even before. So I'll tell you guys what the dates are that we're working with. So Pluto is in Pisces from 1553 to 1578. It was again in Pluto Pisces from 1797 to 1822, and we will not have Pluto again until 2044 to 2068. So we're currently, as we make this video, in the Pluto Aquarius generation and just collective energy.
And in the very early degrees.
Early degrees. And I definitely thought it was interesting to look at Pluto Pisces for the future that is ahead to see if we could get some ideas on what's going. But as always, astrology can give some undertones of what the future can hold, but we cannot fully tell the future. It is up to so many collective energies to decide where and what we are going to move into. And yeah, I'm excited that I won't have to deal with that until I am in my 50s now. So yeah, shall we discuss what we found from Pluto Pisces? Yes. It was kind of a weird history search.
I feel good about it.
I
personally.
Yeah, we can go through the years first, and then we'll kind of share some of the undertones that we saw as we moved through this sign. So starting with at the very beginning, we're looking at the most recent Pluto transit. Is right off rip, we got several wars. We're kind of in revolution energy in certain spots of the world. We definitely zoomed out even kind of beyond just the American history,
because there's not much.
But yeah, in 1798, we had the Quasi War, which was a battle between the United States and the French First Republic. There is, firstly, it needs to be stated that there was so much petty royal times. Like, we looked at the previous 1553 to 1578, and it was just like all this royal family drama. Like
literally, it was like Queen Elizabeth and her cousin being petty and making their countries like be the problem instead of just like keep it in the family.
And I say this too as a precursor because as we looked at this Pluto Pisces transit, it felt very relevant to say that Bridgerton is really on par with this exact date range.
Actually right in the middle of this date range.
So if you are kind of trying to visualize what the times were like, there you go. But yeah, we had a lot of battles going around with like which direction to take things. If you look at 1798 to 1799, we had the Virginia and the Kentucky Resolution. And this was actually like pretty interesting. I went into a big read to give a few of the bullet points. It was really the battles between federal rights versus state rights, and this had been a really big battle to decide, like, should states get to write their own interpretation of the Constitution versus having federal oversight. And this was like a big split, and the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions were really taking the position that certain things that were federal regulations were unconstitutional. And so, yeah, it was this big battle between the two, and the battles really do like keep continuing on. Then in 1799, we had Fry's Rebellion, which was essentially a battle over taxes. And we had, in the 1800s, we had the Library of Congress that was founded, which was an interesting one. We had in 1801, Thomas Jefferson got elected. And yeah, it was interesting to kind of study like the presidential stuff, because right as Pluto moved into Pisces was when George Washington actually stopped being president. And so then it started being like very interesting, because we started obviously having mixes of opinions and like who was going to do what. So these were just like a lot of our origins and roots for a lot of the groundwork of what was going to be coming to fruition. And then I started looking through a little later. We had in 1807, the steamboat was invented. That felt Piscean to me, so I had to note that. We also had an end to the U.S. slave trade with Africa, which was a start to like a really long, exhausting journey to read in the history that was very disturbing, truly. In 1812, we had the War of 1812, which went ongoing, so continued war. I thought it was interesting. In 1817, Harvard Law School was founded. I think that's just fascinating with the tie-ins to all the developments that have happened in our more recent history. Then we had the Panic of 1819. So this is just talking about a financial panic that was just spreading across the country after the war came to a halt. We had unemployment, banks were failing, mortgages were foreclosing, agriculture prices were falling, and a lot of what was coming was collapsed. So it was pretty intense. And then V's got us for the second half.
Yeah, so there was still a lot of wars happening. I personally, there were so many different kinds of wars, not just in America, like all over the continents. We were having collapses of these kingdoms turning into democracies or whatever the next cultural thing was. All over the world.
That Pisces represents endings.
Just food for thought. Outside of that, we had the SS Savannah, who was the first steamboat to go from Georgia all the way across the Atlantic.
Piscean.
Very Piscean. There was a lot of boat news, actually. If I'm being completely honest, a lot of steamboats were the first steamboats to go down different canals and whatnots around as I was reading. Lots of ship news, and I just kept giggling because Pisces.
Water sign power.
Water sign things. Especially because in our Gemini series, we talked about how we got into the air with airplanes, and here we are in water, getting in the water.
Yeah, that is very funny.
First ship sailed through the Erie Canal ever during this time period. And it's a historical fact, but it's also like my lineage fact. 1811, Percy Bysshe Shelley was expelled from the School of Oxford for publishing The Necessity of Atheism. And that feels really awesome to me just because he is of my lineage. In the same note, in 1818, his wife, Mary Shelley, published Frankenstein. So that's pretty cool. Frankenstein feels pretty Piscean to me.
I love that this is your family. There's been so much Pisces in the family.
So my family has so much Pisces, period. And then like Pluto Pisces, here we are. And honestly, if I'm being completely honest, these were the last two cool Pisces. So I'm proud. In 1817, the New York Stock Exchange was created. And I feel like this is important because money's made up. It's like the most Piscean thing ever. And here we go with stocks. Crazy. We talked about a lot during our Pluto Virgo series, how Pluto Virgo came in and established a lot of the foundational mental health practices. In Pluto Pisces, it turns out this is when the first U.S. private mental health hospital was created. So I just thought it was really interesting that in its opposition,
it got refined.
Exactly. I thought that was really important.
Because it had a very dark start, so. I mean, I don't know about this first hospital, but we know where it went.
We know where it went. A 60 to 70 foot sea serpent sighting was reported in Gloucester, Massachusetts.
That's the Loch Ness Monster, right? That's the start?
No, the Loch Ness Monster is Ireland.
Oh.
That's also my people. But it is Loch Ness Monster energy, and we don't get those reports nowadays, only during Pluto Pisces. Maybe Pluto Aries got rid of them, you know what I'm saying?
Or was there more aliens?
Allegedly, they're in the ocean. More fun Pluto Pisces facts for you is that during this time frame, Jane Austen was publishing the best of her works all over, too. I was seeing a lot of travel. Like, one place that she was living in, somebody was trying to, like, make her put edits into her book, and she said, I'll go to another country and publish. I like that energy.
I love that.
Respect. On top of that, the first Grimm fairy tales book was published. So a lot of these like fantasy stories that have withstood the test of time were created during Pluto Pisces.
Which is very funny because also in Pluto Gemini, so you have to keep in mind we got Pisces, Virgo, but then we also have Gemini, Sag, all as our mutable. And we saw so much storytelling happening in Pluto Gemini too. So I love that the mutables with their imagination just be.
And I do feel like Pisces love a story to tell.
They
goodnight.
do.
Yeah.
That's my favorite bonding with Pisces is going into the imaginative world.
1,000%. And that is pretty much all I got. I think the biggest like notes were for me in my research was lots of ship activity, lots of war, boring, find a new plot.
This was the start of plot.
And then lots of what would then be deemed as classic authors publishing in a not classic moment.
And another big sector that didn't get talked about on my first round was it is considered the second Great Awakening from 1790 to 1840. And so huge amounts of religion psychosis be popping off. You said the Mormon church.
The Mormon, so the founder of the Mormon church, or like its main prophet, Joseph Smith, had his first vision during Pluto Pisces, actually, which I thought naturally.
Yeah, and so that was probably even a part of this because mainly what you started seeing was like this huge rise of all of these different branches of religion, which Pisces really does usually connect to higher source, higher power, but with that Plutonian edge, you also get the extremes, and we had a lot of extremes of religion just like going quickly through. So this was definitely the start of evangelical denominations, Methodists, Baptists, like really upticking to a lot of outbreak. But we also see that anytime a planet moves through Pisces, especially with a longer transit, there is usually some sort of putting our belief into something like outside of ourselves and getting lost in a vision. So it's a really high marker of people stepping into these authority positions, saying that they have this great vision and can take it really far. And I thought it was interesting with Pluto Virgo's mix, because as we did our Pluto Virgo video, there was also religion extremes really upticking then. So that was kind of a mirror. And I really do see the Virgo and Pisces axis as being kind of our spiritual axis in astrology.
It was also really interesting because when you go back and watch the Pluto Virgo, there's a lot more of like questioning this like Piscean balance to it. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it said the denominations that grew from the Second Great Awakening were the Latter-day Saints movement,
Mormonism,
Jehovah's Witnesses, Churches of Christ, Seventh-day Adventists, and the Evangelical Christian Church. So we obviously know that that was probably seeming like a huge relief to stuff, but we ended up waking up to a lot of the lies and the power play that existed beyond a lot of those things as the transits continued on. And so, yeah, I definitely want to throw in for other Pisces themes that there is an undertone of just spiritual delusion at times and just a religion extremism.
Speaking of spiritual delusion, another thing that came across my research was that the government actually had to implement a bachelor tax, because I think in this moment, men were starting to say, why would I take on a wife when I have more freedoms without her? And they were like, no, cut it out.
That's Bridgerton core. I feel like there's a few that hinted on. We'll see where Bridgerton continues to go. That is very relevant at this time in history.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, looking ahead, it's very fascinating because we've done a separate video on Pluto and Aquarius as we looked at the most recent transit. And so seeing some of the parallels between the last time Pluto was in Aquarius to this, that is obviously the lead up sign to then Pluto Pisces.
And we're only in the first couple years.
Yeah, so we got a long ways to go. I will be in my 50s when Pluto goes into Pisces. And how does that make you feel?
You're gonna be a little grandma.
I feel like that's very rude to people to think that 50 is grandma.
Okay, I'm sorry. I come from a family of harlots, so most people are grandma by like 45.
The necessities of atheism. I'm just kidding. But yes, as you definitely look into these themes, I love that we now officially have every single Pluto placement going through all of the signs up. And so it's important to look at Pluto Pisces to Pluto Virgo, but then also Pluto Gemini and Pluto Sag. We officially have the full square of all of the Pluto mutable signs.
If you want to get extra nerdy with it, you can look up what your Pluto sign is and then do that same cross. So Aries, Libra, and Capricorn and Cancer would be our cardinals, and then Aquarius, Leo, and Scorpio, Taurus would be the fixed cross.
So we officially have all of the Plutos, so definitely keep checking it out, and we're going to continue on this series going into just further dives on different dynamics of Pluto, because we just think Pluto is so important to learn more about in astrology. We both made family trees of all of the generations ahead of us in the Pluto, and we didn't get to Pluto Pisces. Like the furthest we could take like a lot of the family ancestry was like Pluto Aries at most, but mostly like Pluto Taurus.
If you want to see those, check out our Instagram. It's Mercurial Gems.
Yes, and we hope that you will check out the other episodes if you haven't checked them out already. As always, I do readings. You can see more information on that below, and we will see you in our next episode.
Bye.